Here are some quick tips to improve your Facebook group and make it more engaging. First is to choose a name that stands out and is searchable. We quickly thought about this in the last lecture, but here's an example. For each of these tips, I'm going to show you a case study of why this is a good tip. But when you search for photography, you see all of these different groups. Hey, look at that. A lot of these are named photography. Now, this is not necessarily a bad idea for just getting as many members just to name your group photography, but I'm sure there's thousands of other groups just named photography. Whereas if you have a more specific group, for example, landscape photography, DJI drone photography, San Francisco photography, minimalist photography. This gives more of an idea what this group is all about and will ultimately create more engagement from your members. Yes, a lot of people love photography and a general photography group might be good, but I'll bet you that most of these more specific groups get more engagement from the people following the group. And this follows the pattern of growing your audience. I would much rather have 1,000 true fans in my Facebook group than 10,000 people, but no one actually engages. Our second tip is to have and enforce group guidelines. I also mentioned this before, but specifically if you want people to not post spam messages, or if there's specific types of things you don't want people to post, have that in your course description. Here's an example of Nick Loper's Side Hustle Nation. He has a podcast that I really like, and his pin post actually is the welcome, but it also includes the rules of the group. You can see that in the description. He just has a very short one-sentence description, which is nice, and it's perfect right there. And I actually like how he uses the pin post to have the rules, because anyone that comes to his page, this is what appears on the top, and this is much more eye-catching than the description over here. A lot of people won't even read the description, so they won't even find the rules. Not only that, he goes a little bit further and he uses an image to explain the rules, and he makes it a little bit funny with some spam. So he's doing a lot of good things right here, but the thought about enforcing the rules is important too, because if you let it get away and people start spamming, people are going to leave that group. They're going to stop getting notifications for the group. So as soon as you start your group, make sure you enforce the rules. Our next tip is to welcome new members. I use my pin post in the Online Course Masters to welcome members. I actually posted a video that is a quick welcome, which I think is a nice way to engage with people. I prompt people to post an introduction about themselves. I'll also sometimes message people individually who join the group and ask them to introduce themselves. One other thing I do to welcome members is every couple weeks or so, I'll create a welcome announcement, and I'll welcome everyone. I'll tag people who are new, and I'll put together a little graphic or something and welcome them to the group. So it's not just the same thing that people are welcome from the welcome pin post or something like that, but this creates a little bit more engagement with new members. And the more you can get new members excited about the group, the longer they'll be engaged and the more engaging your group will be overall. Of course, you should be sharing resources with your group. And the point I want to drive home is that it doesn't necessarily have to be your own content. Yes, it would be great to be able to write enough content every day of the week to be able to share something with the group, but you might not have that amount of content. You can use previous content, and I love doing sort of the Throwback Thursday thing where I share an older resource that I put out maybe even years ago to kind of refresh that content. But if someone else has put something out that you think your students or your group members would like, post it to your group. Here's an example of me sharing Scott Duffy. Shout out to another great instructor. He wrote a great article about online courses. And so that's why I shared it with my group. So you can find resources all over the place. And this, again, it's not just for online course creators. This could be for any type of group. With each post, we should be prompting people to engage with the post. Here's an example of Nick Loper in Side Hustle Nation. Every week he puts out it's a similar post, time for Friday wins. And he asked people what people did this week. It's one of the posts that gets the most engagement. You can see here 43 comments. The photo or whatever he posts with it is different every week. It's not always the same. And so you can switch it up, but whenever you post, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just once a week, but with most of your posts, you should be prompting people to engage. Ask them a question, ask them to share their own thoughts about whatever you're posting. Our next tip is to use visual content within your posts. I would argue that adding a photo or something visual to every post makes it more engaging. Here's the ConvertKit family group. This is the email software I use. And if you scroll through these posts, it's all text and it's kind of boring. But when you get a post that has an image like this one, which is a great resource too, this obviously stands out. And just scrolling through this group, all the ones that are just text-based, they kind of just blend together. But when there's a big image, that's what stands out. So I really like that example of using images to create more engaging posts. Use the live feature. I go live every week in my online course masters group. This has become sort of one of my most popular posts. You can see that over 121 views. There's about 700 members of my group right now. It's been a couple months since I got started. These are all students of mine. And typically I get a lot more engagement with the live videos than just regular posts. It's important to try to be consistent. If you can keep it to a schedule, that's even better. If you can do it at the same time every week, even better. If you can't do it every time, and if you can't do it every week, just make sure that you let people know that you are going to go live ahead of time so that they can mark it on their calendar, or at least just have it in their mind and be ready when you do go live. A lot of people do watch the videos after the fact, and that's totally fine too. And my last tip is to use the pin post wisely. You saw a couple of examples before of how I do use it for a welcome message. Nick Loper uses it to welcome people, to prompt people to introduce themselves, and to explain the group rules. Other ideas is if you have a very, very engaged group, once it starts to get really big and maybe there's 5-10 posts in the group, not just from yourself, but also group members per day, you might want to reserve that pin post for whatever you actually post. And this is something I did early on in the Online Course Masters group. And when you're starting out, you might want to do this too. Whenever you post something new, pin it to the top so that when someone does come to your group, if they're a member or they're someone new, they see that new content, especially if it's important. If you're selling something, if you're promoting a product, or if you're just giving away a high quality free piece of content or something, put it at the top so that group members are going to see it. Sometimes things can get pushed down if more and more people are posting in the group. So at the end of the day, I chose it to use my pin post as my welcome message, but I can always pin something if it's important for that day or that week, and then repin my welcome message at a later time. Awesome. I hope you enjoyed these tips, and I hope they help you have an amazing, engaged Facebook group.